You are watching Divorce Shield Live, the weekly show just for men that are thinking about or going through a divorce. Today, we're going to discuss the mistakes you need to avoid when you're going through a divorce. Welcome back to the show. My name is John Knocklinger. I'm a recovering divorce attorney and the founder and head coach of Divorce Shield, the only company exclusively devoted to training men how to plan for and crush divorce. You can find out more about us at thedivorceshield.com. Today, my guest is Christina Previte. She is a divorce attorney, influencer, lifestyle leader, and podcaster. For more than 16 years, she has helped people find happiness again by finding creative solutions to get them through divorce. She has taken her desire to help people by starting the Wake Up Call with Christina Previte podcast. There, she interviews people with incredible stories of overcoming challenges, succeeding, and living their most authentic lives. You can learn more about Christina on Instagram at ThePrev, and that's P-R-E-V, but we'll put that in the comments as well. Thank you for being here, Christina.
Hi, John. Of course. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, it's our pleasure. I should add, by the way, that Christina is also the co-owner of New Jersey Divorce Solutions, a divorce and family law firm in New Jersey. And full disclosure, I'm the other owner of New Jersey Divorce Solutions. So yes, Christina is my work wife.
That's right. And you are my work husband.
So I have so many questions for you about mistakes that people make in divorce. But what I always like to do in interviews is start back at the beginning. What made you get into the business of divorcing people?
Gosh, I think there's a funny saying in the legal community that we don't really pick family law, that it picks us. And I think there's actually some truth to that. But when I was first starting out and I was, as we call it, a baby lawyer, I don't think I fully appreciated the emotional aspect of a divorce. I was really interested in the nuts and bolts of the finances and dividing things and working with the numbers. And then, of course, as we know now, that's such a small part of what we really do. But I like helping people change their lives because I think we do that.
Yeah, well, you often say that you're really not an attorney, but a professional problem solver, right? Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, I think every lawyer really is a problem solver. The good ones are problem solvers. So when someone comes into my office, I think what they're really looking for is someone to counsel them, not from a therapeutic standpoint, although some people might be looking for that. They're really looking for you to help them solve a problem that they have. I think the difference between a really good lawyer and just an average mediocre lawyer is not someone who just answers your questions, because I can just recite law to you, but it's really someone that counsels you and shows you how you can use the law to reach your goals, whatever they may be, and kind of helps you figure that out.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I don't think a lot of attorneys even get into what are their clients' goals. They just kind of are robots. Okay, you need a divorce, so we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and then we're going to do this third thing that I do with every single divorce client that walks into my door, as opposed to what's important to you. But we're going to talk a little bit about that today, about the mistakes that you've seen people make, both before they start divorce and sort of during the process. So why don't we start with the beginning, which is starting the process. Have you seen mistakes people make in terms of when they started, starting it too early, starting it too late? Have you seen people make those mistakes?
Well, I think as far as mistakes, I think the first thing that people really need to do is get themselves in the proper mindset before they really even start. And a lot of that has to do with expectations. And a good lawyer can help you with that. A not so good lawyer probably will never talk about it. But I think a good lawyer sets you up with reasonable expectations. So we all know as lawyers, we can probably look at your case and in a very short amount of time, figure out what is a likely an appropriate outcome in terms of finances and division of assets and things of that nature. But if it were really that easy, divorces wouldn't drag on forever. And I think we all know that often they do. And a lot of that has to do with not being in the proper mindset. So you can't go into a divorce thinking that you're going to get everything you want, that you're keeping everything, that what you want is going to dictate how everything is going to go. If you go into it expecting that I'm going to have to make compromises, I may not love those compromises, but in order for this to really be done and not drag on forever and not cost me a fortune, I need to be ready and prepared that I'm going to have to make compromises and I'm not going to get everything that I want. So that's first and foremost. And I think what goes along with that is I'm not going to be happy at the end with the settlement. I think where the happiness comes in is that you get done and you get to move on with your life and you get to start a new chapter in your life, because obviously you weren't happy if you're thinking about getting a divorce. So that's the whole mindset portion that I really think makes such a huge difference and sets the tone for how somebody experiences their divorce.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, so many attorneys tell, their potential clients exactly what they want to hear. It's like a guy who comes in who has a very demanding job and his wife has been a stay-at-home mother for 10 years. And he comes in and says, I want full custody of my kids and I don't want my wife to have any parenting time. Okay, well, there are attorneys out there that will say, oh yeah, well, we can get that for you. We can definitely do that. Whereas you would definitely tell them that's not going to happen. And if that's your goal and that's what you need to happen, then I'm probably not the right attorney for you, because that's not going to happen. And, you have those situations. I think you've seen them time and time again where someone gets so mad at their attorney on the day at the end of the case just because they were told something that was clearly impossible or clearly outside of reasonableness at the very beginning. Which of course you never do, Christina, because you actually practice what you preach. You do all of these things for your clients, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that people come to me because they just want me to tell them whatever they want to hear. I suppose some people may like that, but I don't feel like I'm doing them a service. They're paying me to give them legal advice, to counsel them, and to use my experience with the whole divorce process and my professional knowledge to help them. And I don't see how I'm helping them if I'm just telling them something and selling them a bill of goods just really to get them to hire me. And then I can't deliver that. I don't feel good about that. So I just can't do that with people.
Yeah, and most of the time these people don't even, they don't really care about how you're going to get them from point A to point B, how the sausage is made, as we like to say. They just want to know that they're going to be okay and they're going to get through the process. And I suspect there's a lot of people you probably talk to on your podcast that have been through something extreme like divorce or something like that, similar to divorce, that really where they come out the other side, they're stronger because of how they approach the process and how they went through it, as opposed to worrying about, how much money they're going to get from their ex-spouse and what percentage of the house they're going to get and all these things. If you concentrate on the goal, what is it you really need to be happy? It's really going to be really helpful for you. But I want to go back to expectations. What advice would you give someone for finding an attorney?
Well, I think that, you can ask around for people that, if you know people that have been divorced and who had a really good experience with their attorney, and maybe ask them, why did they have a good experience with their attorney? Why do they say that? Because some people want a mediation-oriented, settlement-oriented attorney, which is what I recommend. And then some people want what they refer to as a pit bull, which I'm using in finger quotes, or a shark or something like that. You may think that you want a shark because I think the implication there is that you're getting someone who's just going to get you everything you want and is going to be uber aggressive. But that's not really the case. It's been my experience that when you have a shark or a pit bull, they just want to litigate and litigate and litigate. And that's not consistent with settling, getting it done sooner rather than later, and trying to keep it, the cost down. So if you get a pit bull, someone who's notorious for that and likes to litigate, you should expect to spend a lot of money and you should expect it to take a long time. Don't expect to get everything you want because there's no way to do that. I don't care if you have a pit bull or a little wallflower. You are not getting everything you want. It's not possible. So with that in mind, that's why I recommend, more mediation oriented attorneys, because they know that and they're going to help you get it done quickly, as quickly as possible and with less cost. So if you see an attorney who's talking about mediation, then that's a good sign. If you hear someone saying, oh, we're going to file a complaint right away, and they don't explain to you why, because there are some cases where you may need to file a complaint right away, but I think those are the minority. And you just hear a lot of litigation talk, like going to court and filing motions and filing papers with the court, and it's all about that. And you never hear them talk about settlement and mediation and, things more oriented towards settling. Then I think that's a huge red flag. It's someone who probably just does boilerplate stuff.
Yeah. Well, what do you tell a client of yours that comes in where you see their spouse has hired that kind of attorney that's a, notorious pit bull who just likes to drive up the litigation and the fees?
I will tell them that particular attorney, and it depends, I don't want other attorneys to think I'm bad-mouthing attorneys around the neighborhood, but we all know in our legal community that there are certain attorneys who just have a reputation for being very litigation minded. And there are some attorneys in particular that I can think of, I won't say any names, that they always start out every single case with an order to show cause, which just seems silly, right? How could all those cases all need to start out with an order to show cause? It just starts on a really sour note. And I think if you don't have to go there, why go there? So if I know that someone's spouse has retained one of those people, I will just be very honest with them and tell them, so-and-so has a reputation for being incredibly aggressive and incredibly litigation oriented. And I think that you should expect, unless you're able to have a conversation with your spouse, or we can go to mediation right away, you should expect that this is going to be a long and expensive divorce. And you might want to tell your spouse that. And that depends, of course, on the relationship that the spouses have. But sometimes people don't know that they have hired one of those people.
Yeah, no, that happens quite frequently. Well, you were just talking about communication with your spouse. What have you seen anyone make mistakes in terms of actually talking to their spouse during the divorce when they're represented by attorneys? I mean, I know I see frequently people feel like, I don't like the advice that my spouse's attorney is giving to them, so I'm going to try to intercede and convince them that their attorney is wrong. Have you seen stuff like that go on?
I've seen that go on, but I have to say, and most of the time when that happens, and if you're a viewer who's doing this, I hope that you will have an open mind. It's usually because they are trying to strong arm the other person into doing what they want. And we started out this discussion with, you're not going to get everything you want. You're just not going to. So when you get comfortable with that, and that allows you to compromise and strategically pick the areas where you're going to compromise, the process will become easier for you and it will move along. So if you're thinking, and I actually have a client like this right now who things aren't going the way he wants it, and he wants what he wants, and that's it. And he's not going to compromise. And he's actually had a long-term marriage where that's what the dynamic was. he called the shots, he made the decisions. The wife was sort of meek and just let him. And that is what he has grown accustomed to. And he doesn't like that that's not what's happening anymore. She has an attorney who is advocating for her. And it's been difficult. I've had to have many conversations with him to explain to him that this is her attorney. Her attorney really is doing her job. I don't see her being overly aggressive, but she's doing her job. And, you're not on the same team, so to speak, anymore. She's making her own decisions. You're making your own decisions, but you don't get to decide for her now. So you have to just trust the process that she has an attorney who's advocating for her. And, you have to assume that she has consented to whatever her attorney is advocating on her behalf. And I don't think, going home and saying, your attorney is she's terrible. She's just driving the litigation forward. Should, just take less alimony or whatever it is. I think it just causes more problems.
Yeah, it certainly does. And one of the things that we teach men to do here at Divorce Shield is protecting your freedom. Part of that is protecting yourself from domestic violence allegations. And I find that especially when emotions are high, those kinds of conversations can easily turn into a big fight, where now you've got police involved, your kids are exposed to all of this, and they're already having a hard enough time because their parents are getting divorced. And now all of a sudden, instead of just getting divorced, you've now got orders of protection or restraining orders or whatever it's called in the state where you live. I mean, it's really, these communications can easily go downhill fast because emotions are so strong. I'll go ahead and ask you, but of course that's happened in cases you've been part of, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I want to say, I don't want people to think that I just assume that it's always the husband that's pressuring the wife. Sometimes the wife does have an attorney that's being unreasonable. We know that there are attorneys who don't really allow their clients to make the decisions. They kind of try to force what they think is a correct result onto their own client. And that happens a lot. And if you can have a somewhat amicable conversation with your spouse and say, why don't we try to resolve some of these things without our attorneys duking it out? And I encourage that if you can. But like you pointed out, you do have to be mindful of the dynamic that exists between the two of you. So if you can't sit at a table and have a civil conversation, that's probably not going to work. And like you said, there may be situations where you need to be concerned about someone claiming that you're harassing them or intimidating them. So it's kind of a tricky balance. And that's why you need a good attorney who's going to counsel you and talk about that with you. I'm not sure that answered your question.
No, it absolutely does. I mean, at the end of the day, you've just got to sort of understand that whenever you chose to go down a path of litigation where you're in court with attorneys and you're fighting, that it by its very nature is more emotional than trying to do something more amicable at the very beginning, like mediation. And so once you're in that process, you really need to be mindful of the dynamics it creates. It just creates. And that's why I think you said this earlier. You have to, you should always start by looking at a way to keep emotions down. What process can we use that's best for our family, that we can keep our emotions down? Because if you get good advice from an attorney, your expectations are grounded, then it should be easy to get a resolution. I mean, it really should. I mean, we say that, people kind of roll their eyes when they hear that from an attorney, but it's true. Most divorces, like you said, probably 90% of divorces are easy. They should be able to be resolved in, maybe 5 or 6 hours. 5 or 6 hours of sitting down and just talking should easily get resolved. Because, I mean, how many times have you seen it where you told somebody, here's what's going to happen, or here's what I think is going to happen, that at the very end of the case, it's within 5%.
Yes, almost always that happens. And especially when you get a client who starts expressing concern about the cost, and my God, this is going to drag on forever. We're not even close to a settlement. And I always tell them the same thing. Some people are more receptive than others. Look, you can settle. This is within your power too. It's not just about your spouse. So, oh, if my spouse would just agree to something, but what have you given him or her to agree to? Could you tweak that a little bit? Could you compromise a little bit more? Because it can't just be your way. And the best way to get done is to settle, right? Not dig in your heels.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, there's two ways your case will resolve. You're going to go to trial and have a judge make a decision, or you're going to settle. That's it. There's no third option.
Yeah.
And that trial option, I mean, I haven't seen a divorce trial that costs less than, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 because of just the nature of how long it takes to get there.
Yeah, usually more.
Yeah, and usually those cases, well, most of the cases that go to trial, it's because there's really deeper issues than what we're talking about here. But so we were talking about communication between the spouses, but what about talking to your kids about your spouse? What issues do you see come up there?
Well, I see often people, want their children's love. They don't want to be the bad guy in the divorce. They are concerned about how their children are perceiving them. And because of that, they will feel the need to explain themselves or to explain situations that are happening between them and their spouse, which really isn't appropriate. Depending on your kid's age, even if they're teenagers, they don't really have the capacity to understand the dynamic between a husband and a wife or, two spouses. They just don't. And even the teenagers who look kind of like adults, just because they've gone through puberty doesn't mean that they're adults. And they really don't have that intellectual capacity yet to be able to sort through all of that. And for that reason, I think it's just contrary to the children's best interest to have those conversations with them. And I know that it's really tempting to do that when you know that your spouse is doing it. So you know that your husband or your wife is doing it, is bad-mouthing you to your kids. And then you feel the need to counter whatever they're saying. It's like, no, that's not what happened. I'm not a bad person. I don't exactly know how you handle that. That might go beyond the scope of my expertise. I always recommend people talk to a therapist and someone who specializes with children to figure out how to talk to them. But I do think there's a way to sort of defend yourself on some level without really giving them all the dirty details. Like, you're not going to say, well, mommy cheated on me and that's the real reason we're getting a divorce. I mean, that's so harmful to the kids. It really is. And I just want people to know that really resist that urge to go there. Someday your kids will be grown up. They're going to remember everything. They're going to remember who was mean to who was talking smack about who, what was daddy saying about our other parent. And I think it's really important to be mindful of that, because you don't want 10 years, 20 years from now when they're in therapy talking about, whatever their parents did to them, as we all do. You don't want them saying, well, I just remember, dad always talking about mom, always talking about what a bitch she was or whatever. You don't want them to remember that. You want them to look back and say, you know what, mom or dad was always talking bad about my other parent, but this dad never did. I don't remember him ever doing that.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I mean, the long-term impacts on your kids. I mean, but like the more immediate impact is if you start talking about your spouse with your kids in a really derogatory way, your divorce is going to be horrible. It's just going to be horrible. You're going down a path that's going to create more animosity, more emotion, more money that you're going to have to spend. It's just going to get worse because then you'll start fighting about things that don't really matter.
Yeah.
It just gets worse and worse. One thing that has been coming up a lot, even more so now that we're all stuck at home during this, I guess we still call it a quarantine, right? I don't know what we're calling it these days.
Life.
Yeah, life. Is, people are using a lot more electronic forms of communication, email, text messages, Facebook Messenger, even going on, these new apps like Clubhouse, and people are just being very open about things. Have you seen anybody just be a little too open on these sorts of electronic, either written or oral or video places that's created evidence that their spouse really, or ex-spouse, has been able to really use to get them in trouble?
Well, if you shouldn't badmouth your ex on social media. Just don't. Because you might think, oh, but my settings are private. You don't know who's spying on you. All your friends on there, all your 500 friends, half of them we don't actually even know. You don't know who those people are. You don't know who has a connection to your spouse. You don't know if they're printing something like, oh, look at what he said about you on Facebook. Just assume that whatever you say and whatever you post on Facebook is going to be in front of a judge one day. That's pretty much a good policy, right? No matter what it is, if you post a picture of your dinner, assume that a judge is going to see that. So they're also going to see, well, where were you? What time was it? Because you never know if there comes a time like, your wife might say, well, every time he has the kids, he's got them with babysitters. He's out partying. Well, are you posting all that partying on Facebook? If you are, there's proof that that's what you're doing. And it might seem really, some of it might just seem really innocuous and benign, but it might not be. It might turn out not to be. So, you know what? Probably the best thing to do is just close down all your social media accounts while you're getting a divorce. I mean, that's the best thing that you could do. Just pause them and resume things later. Something you and I see constantly, though, is a cohabitation situation where someone's paying alimony and the recipient of the alimony starts having a relationship with somebody else, and maybe they're living with them or like half living with them, and they start posting all this stuff about the relationship, all these wonderful vacations they've been on, and sometimes referring to the other one as a wife or spouse, and maybe even talking about how they live together or they moved together. It's quite amazing to me what I see people post, and it's all evidence. Yeah. It's all evidence that you're living together. So that's one really great example. But it happens all the time in other settings too.
It does. And, another big issue is, your spouse recording you without you really knowing it. You can't do that in every state. And you do need to check with a local attorney to determine whether or not you can actually record in the place where you live. I can tell you in New Jersey, you can record without telling the person that you're recording them, as long as you're part of the conversation. So, I tell people not only what you were just talking about, whatever you write on social media can be evidence. Just consider anything that comes out of your mouth could be evidence, period. And you have to be so careful about what you're saying to anybody about anything whenever you start going through a divorce, because those recordings come out all the time, don't they?
They do. We've had so many cases where an example is a DV trial, domestic violence trial, where there's a restraining order where your client insists, I never threatened her. I'm thinking of one in particular that I had, and lo and behold, we're sitting in court and the other attorney produces a recording of him telling her, very angrily that he's going to kill her. And, he didn't mention that to me. So I wasn't very happy. But yeah, assume that every conversation you have with your ex is being recorded. That's the safest way. Just assume whatever text messages you send that, they are, even if they're deleted, they're never deleted. Nothing's ever deleted.
No. It's one of the things I teach men that are planning for divorce is to start audio recording it if they're allowed to, their interactions, just because it's something that at least protects you. It really does. I mean, and people think that it's a bad thing, but you and I have seen so many people who are caught up in those false allegations or ones that you were able to prove because there was a recording, but it's better to have evidence to protect yourself later on. At least I think it is. And
that has been in the John Knocklinger playbook for many years, as long as I've known him.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Because I've seen it be helpful in so many cases, especially domestic violence cases, where someone says, oh, he threatened me, he said this, he said that. And then, lo and behold, here's the recording that shows that she was the one screaming. She was the one doing everything. And they come in handy. And, you just don't want to get into he said, she said territory when you're in court. It just never goes well. Half the time judges just roll their eyes and they say, just come on, guys, just get out of here. Go find a way to resolve this.
Yeah, they don't want to figure it out. And also, I have to say, be careful deleting things from Facebook and social media because you don't want someone to discover it. I actually had a case one time where my adversary made an argument that it was considered spoliation of evidence. And that we just went down a rabbit hole that we really could have avoided. So it became this big question. Well, is it? If you're intentionally deleting something you posted on Facebook because it's not favorable to you in a court proceeding, are you interfering with evidence? So just avoid that altogether.
Yeah, just don't post. I think your initial advice is great. Just take a break from social media. Just take a break. There's nothing wrong with it. The world will still turn. You'll still get up every morning. It'll be fine. Because you know what? You'll be tempted to write things that you will regret. Because that's what we do on social media, right? You're behind the screen. Actually, Christina, you have another, I guess it's a podcast that she does that's called Shit Talking, right?
Yep.
But I think the shit part has a nice little, how is it spelled? I forget.
The I in shit is an exclamation point.
Yes. Go search for that on Facebook. They do weekly shows. It's really great. But this last week, they were talking about this very issue, which is, how people act so differently on social media than they do in real life. People are either fake or they're nastier or more aggressive because they're like a faceless person. And I think there's some tendency to do that. And I think if you're going through a divorce, you might feel the tendency to be a little bit too honest and too open and write too many things. So just don't write anything at all. It's kind of like that whole adage, when you write a nasty email, don't press send. Just let it sit on your computer for half an hour, then go back and read it and say, is this the right, should I be sending this or shouldn't I be sending this?
You know what I love? And this is sort of, I don't know, this is just the way my divorce lawyer brain works. And it might sound a little negative, and tell me if you experience this. But you'll hear somebody, maybe they'll post it on Facebook or something, and they'll say, oh, I just got, a big bonus, or I started a new business. And I have to say, I could never have done this without my wife. She's been the backbone of this family and this business. And they go on and on and on. And I kind of chuckle to myself a little. I'm like, that's great. I really hope they're not having marital problems, because if I represented her, that's going to be exhibit A.
Oh, yeah.
But look, he said that she was everything and she practically started the business, because, later they're going to say, well, no, it's my business. I mean, she didn't really have anything to do with it.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to have that post.
Yes.
I mean, come on. That's just great stuff. Well, that's not really what I meant. Well, let's look at your words, shall we?
Mm-hmm. I was lying. That's probably what they would say. I just said that. I was trying to make my wife feel good.
It's just social media. No one tells the truth on social media.
That's true. I'm Giselle Bundchen on social media.
Ah,
Well, you know the background behind
yep,
that.
yeah. All right, so I have four little statements I want to read to you, and I want you to tell me whether you think they're true or false and why. Number one, you can use the court to get revenge on your spouse.
No, false. And that might backfire on you. You might end up being the one that gets revenge perpetrated on you because the results in court are so uncertain. Nobody can tell you what is going to happen in court, especially these days. You know, there's judges sitting in family law that have been on the bench for a hot minute. They never practiced family law. Some of them don't even want to be there in family law, in family court. And they're human beings. You know, they're not infallible. You can't expect them to sort all of this out, all of the business of your marriage for however long you were married, and figure all that out. That's really for you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, number two, you can lie about having an asset or not having an asset and get away with it.
I mean, I suppose you can. I mean, it's possible, but I think what happens more often is it gets found out at some point, and the consequences for that can really be significant. You know, once you lose your credibility with the court, you don't ever get it back. You know, it's kind of like life, right? You know, once you lose credibility, it's that's it. You can't unring the bell. And then it starts to become, well, he's lying about that. What else is he lying about? And then when they find the asset or the bonus or the cash in the shoebox, whatever it is that you're hiding or lying about, they're still going to get it, and they may get more. They may get counsel fees. There might be other negative consequences as a result. So I don't think it's worth the trouble. And I know what I always tell people too, you're not going to outsmart everybody. You're not smarter than everybody else. So if you think that you're smarter than everybody else who's here, you're not. You're just not.
That's so true. That's so true. I mean, there's a lot of people who just think they're smarter than everybody else. But you know what I think is particularly interesting is that, let's say you think you get away with it, but then you slip up and you tell someone about it, and somehow it gets back to your ex-spouse. They might be able to come back into court and reopen this whole thing. So don't do it. There's no point to doing it. All right, number three, using your attorney as a therapist will help you resolve your case.
Absolutely not. and using your attorney as a therapist is a surefire way to have your phone calls returned less. I'm sorry, I don't mean to poke fun. It's, we're not therapists. It's not our role. And if you're just calling all the time because you want to vent, don't do that with your lawyer. First of all, they're too damn expensive. Have health insurance pay for your therapist. And that's what they're there for. They're there to help you sort that out. And I also think that attorneys don't really want to do that. I'll be very honest. I don't want to do that. It's not that I don't care about you or how you're feeling. It's not that I don't want to hear your story, but I also don't need to hear it 500 times. And I don't need to hear it every single time we have a phone call. At some point, it's just not relevant anymore. And you want your attorney to focus on really what you hired them for, the legal aspect of your case, not the therapy aspect of your case.
Yeah, there's so many people I wish would really take that to heart. I mean, the one piece of advice I give everybody prior to starting a divorce, and I don't care what kind of mood you're in, I don't care what kind of emotional state you're in, is to go get yourself a therapist. Because there's going to be things during the divorce process you're going to want to talk to somebody about that are not legal in nature. And they're just, you're going to get therapists that don't cost $300, $350, $400 an hour, who are going to, first of all, be trained to help you, whereas your attorney is not trained to help you the way a therapist is.
Yeah, and you know what? Another thing I hear people complain about is, my friends all disappeared. It's like they think divorce is contagious. And I think there's some truth to that. But I'll tell you, even with friends that I have who have been through divorce, people who are going through a divorce seem incapable of talking about anything else. Really. And, you kind of alienate people when you do that. And I think that that's another reason to get a therapist, is because you want to talk about those things with your therapist, not your lawyer, not your doctor, not your hairdresser, not your bartender, not your friends, not your family. They don't want to hear it after a while. And I'm a little embarrassed to admit it, but there are times when I have a friend or an acquaintance who I know is getting a divorce, and I'll see the phone ring and I'll just think, God, I just don't want to talk to them. Because I know that all they want to talk about is their divorce. In my case, maybe they want some free legal advice. And I just don't want to do it. It's like every single conversation is about the same thing. So while I have compassion for people, and I know that, of course, they want to talk about it because it's such a big thing in their life at the time. But just be mindful that your friends and your family may not want to hear about it every single time you call. So that's why you talk about it with your therapist.
Yeah, and if you want to talk, and if you do want to talk about it, even beyond therapy with other just regular people, there are plenty of divorce support groups out there where you can go and commiserate with other people. I mean, they're everywhere. They're online. So go find one if that's something that you want to do. That way you can talk to other people who only want to talk about divorce too. It'll be great.
I highly recommend that because they're all going through the same thing and they get it. They understand you probably more than anybody else.
Yeah.
They're going through it. They get it. Those are the people that you should really talk to largely about that.
Yes. All right. The last one is orders are just pieces of paper that you don't have to follow.
Come on now, John. Of course not. No, you better follow those orders. There are consequences for not following orders.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point recently. The reason I put this on here is I've been talking to a lot of people who, when they're trying to resolve their divorce, they're asking me questions like, well, what do I do if they don't do this? It's like a prerequisite to what they even want to agree to is, well, what's going to happen if they don't do it? Because I think what's happened, in all honesty, is that the consequences for not following orders or complying with orders have been watered down so much in a lot of different places. Just have gotten accustomed to the fact that, if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, I might just get a slap on the wrist the first time and be told, don't do this again, and not suffer any real consequences. But, it goes back to what you were saying before about credibility. If you ever need to come back to court and you need a judge's help, one surefire way to not get a judge's help is to not follow orders, and to be the one that is the problem. So yeah, follow those orders. That was kind of a tongue-in-cheek one, just because it's obvious, right?
Yeah, I agree with you about that. I didn't want to go there, but since you brought it up, because I don't want to empower people to not follow orders, but yeah, I mean, often, and you never know which one it's going to be, because you could get a judge that, drops the hammer on you. So you never really know, but I do think that a lot of times it's just a little slap on the wrist. It's like, okay, well, don't do that anymore. Okay. Or, getting counsel fees is difficult. If somebody's not following an order and you have to enforce it, you would think that that person should get counsel fees, but often they don't. So, it's unpredictable. We said that already. Going to court is just really unpredictable.
Yeah, totally is unpredictable. Well, I hope that people learned a little bit about the things you should or should not be doing during divorce today. Christina, of course, knows more about divorce than most people will ever forget. If people are interested in being on your podcast, Christina, or being represented in a divorce by New Jersey Divorce Solutions, how could they contact you about both of those things?
Well, they can go to our website at New Jersey Divorce Solutions. Obviously, it's based in New Jersey, hence the name, at centraljerseyfamilylaw.com. And they can find they can find me in general on Instagram at the Prev, which you mentioned earlier. And that's always a good place to check out what I'm doing with my podcast. And if you're interested in being a guest, or you know someone that would be a great candidate for being a guest, you can just private message me on Instagram, and I'd love to hear about it.
And I encourage everyone to check out your Instagram page. I'm always plugging it because I just think it's a really fun page. You really do a lot of fun stuff, a lot of great quotes, a lot of really interesting things that I really encourage everyone to go take a look at. All right, Christina, well, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see everybody next time.